Hey there everybody and welcome back to another Blender tutorial, Hotel Edition. So I'm a bit flustered. I got a different microphone, I got a different room I'm in. There's probably people having sex the room across from me, and if they're not, they can hear me talking about them, which is almost weirder. Either way, I thought for today I want to revisit the Slinky tutorial I did ages ago. If you haven't seen it, it's a classic, but it uses all these modifiers, and it isn't kind of the optimal way to do things now that we have geometry nodes. So I tasked myself with asking, how much of this can be outsourced to the nodes, off to a different country, we have them work on the nodes, bring them back, and can we get a faster, better result? And it turns out the answer is yes, and we can actually do some cool stuff with the color and all that. So we got a phone recording my video, a Blue Yeti, like I'm from 2007. Let's begin. So I'm using Blender version 3.1 alpha. Everything I do here should work in 3.0, which is what everybody's using, but 3.1 doesn't make me better than you, it doesn't make me have better hair than you. That's just natural. I just have better hair than you. Here's how we're gonna do it. So, geometry nodes. We're gonna try to do this is possible in geonodes, and then we're going to tack on another modifier just to make it easy. So cube, turn it into a geonodes modifier, so you can see that's right there. Get rid of the node, and let's start dropping some things down. So order of operations, what do we want to do? Well, we want to generate a slinky, just kind of like a spiral, which is super easy, but we also want to be able to, one, deform it along an arc like it's traveling, but also kind of compress the slinky to either side, because that's how they move. So those are three tasks. Let's start with doing the creation of the slinky. To do this, there's actually a primitive made for this, curved spiral. Well, I wouldn't say it's made for slinkies. I don't know if the developers were like, okay, now we need to add in the slinky node, but maybe they did. Curved spiral creates a curve, so this isn't a mesh, but it's actually a curve primitive that follows curve stuff. You can see that the radii are different from beginning to end, so I'm just going to make sure those are the same. And in fact, it doesn't really matter what they are as long as they are the same number. So I'm just going to make a parameter for that. For now, let's set it at 1. And we can also control the height of this. We actually want it to be quite tall. And we want it to have a bunch of coils. So that's going to be the rotations. Notice that the rotations don't scale with height, which we could do as a math expression, but for now, let's not. So there is our slinky. To turn it into a mesh, really all we're going to be doing is just, curve to mesh. So a while ago, I was at the beach, and I made the mistake of getting sand near my laptop, and now there's sand under like half these keys, and they don't press that well. But curve to mesh is going to take our curve and convert it into a mesh, but it needs to know what curve to thicken the other one with, if that makes sense. A thickening agent. Seems like all the girls are using thickening agents in this year of 2021, almost the last tutorial of this year. Either way, I'm using a curved circle to kind of coil around the other one. So if this was set to 3, you can see it's a little hard to tell, but it's more of a triangular curve. As we add resolution, it gets a bit nicer. Okay, so fine. That's how we make the actual slinky. Nobody cares about that. That was kind of the easiest part. The real question is, how do we do the compression, and how do we also do this transformation along a curve thing? So I'm actually going to start off with the compression because it's a little more challenging. If you think about it, what is compression of the slinky before it goes on the curve? Well, it's basically saying take the z-coordinates and either stretch them to the bottom or stretch them to the top. In other words, I'm taking the helix and compressing it down or up. In other words, remapping the z-coordinate. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to do that before we have it go on a path, because it's easy when this thing is standing up nice and straight. We don't have to deal with the, oh, it's going along a circle, but it's easier to do it this way, and then, the other one. Order of operations. So we need information about the z-axis, so whenever I need information, I always, not capture attribute, even though that sounds correct, I attribute statistic, because that's going to give me information about what is the minimum z value, where's the bottom, and where's the top, which is useful because if we change the height, that's subject to change. And since I want to remap the z-coordinate anytime I change the position of a curve or a mesh, always, at least so far, until they add new nodes for this, I always use set positions. I'm going to reset the positions. So starting off, I need this geometry to give me information about the z-coordinate. So let's extract that position. We are going to separate on the XYZ so that I can look at the position of every point on the curve, but I only care about the Z location. So now we have a bunch of information here, and what we want to do is map this to like a usable interval, because right now it's going from some minimum to some maximum. Minimum is always going to be 0 in this case, but the maximum is going to be the height. I guess we don't actually need this since we know what those are, but if I was to like move this in space, it would be a bit more complicated. Either way, I want to remap this to a nice 0 to 1 interval where we can do some very simple operations on it, and then we're going to remap it to minimum to maximum. So let's do that. Map range. If you don't understand what I'm doing, you will in a moment. I'm going to take the Z coordinate, which is what we care about. I'm going to map it from whatever kind of max and minimum that it's going to, because the bounding box is probably pretty big. And I want to map it to 0 to 1. This way it's usable. And for our stretching and squashing and all this, I'm just going to use a color ramp. This will make sense in a moment. And after we do our transformation, we just need to send it back. So think about this as setting up, transformation, and sending it back. So this time we're going 0 to 1, and we're going back to our minimum to maximum. And this will be, all the setup is just so that we can do our set position. So I'm just going to combine X, Y, Z. We're going to remap the position to, well, this is our new Z coordinate, and then X and Y we're just going to reuse. So again, if you see these nodes and you're like, wow, I thought I was done with school, or maybe you're still in school. You thought you were done. Nah, dude. You're back in it. Fucking get on those right-handed desks, even though you're left-handed. There's 2 in the back, but right-handed students are using them, and they're probably from the 70s since those are wooden desks. You're back in it. So what we've done here is we've taken the Z coordinate, we've remapped it to 0 to 1 so we can do a transformation, sent it back, connected it, and then X and Y we just reused. So when I do this, hopefully nothing should happen. Perfect, because we haven't done anything to our Z coordinate. But now you can see if we do some weird stuff, we get stuff happening to the Z. Of course, this isn't what we want, but this is an interesting effect in its own right. You can see this color ramp is kind of controlling the height of this. For our stretching and squashing, it turns out that what we actually want is to just change the color of these. So you can see when I bring this up to 1, it keeps the same length, right? It's not like shortening it. It's literally pushing up or remapping it in a linear way. If you wanted to, you could get weird and do easing, and you'll notice this kind of does it in a non-linear way. If anything, that kind of looks better because what we have is some extra coils on the bottom and top, which I think is realistic, but that's up to you. So that's going to control one side, and the other one is going to control the other side. So these are our parameters. At this point, let's do a save. I'm going to call this available on Patreon, because you can get the blend file on Patreon and a bunch of other stuff. Check out the link in the description. Thank you all, 750 some. Available on Patreon from the hotel. That's what we'll call this blend file. Don't want to lose this progress. So at this point, we have this stretching and squashing thing, and we can animate it, whatever. But assuming that that's good to go, now what we want to do is we have the system that remaps the Z-coordinate, and I want to have it go along an arc. Now, there is probably a not too difficult way to do this in geonodes, but it's so much faster to do it in a modifier. So until all the modifiers come into geonodes, we're going to do it this way. So first, we generated our thing, and we stretched and squashed it. Now we're going to use something called the curve modifier, and this is going to let us remap this mesh onto a curve that we generate. So no, this is no longer in geonodes, but because this is like 1,000 times easier, I will do it this way because it makes sense. So I made a curve, so Shift A, curve, circle. This is what we want it to, I mean, really it's an arc, but that we want, but circle's fine. And what we want to do is, first of all, I guess let's keep it like this, and let's remap it to this curve. So geonodes is first applied, then the curve modifier. Remap it to this. You can see it's not working, so you just kind of go along X, Y, Z until one of them works. In this case, it turns out Z-axis works, and that's going to be dependent on the orientation of this. You can see it does some weird stuff. But now if we go into edit mode and rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis, so it's facing this way, and then I believe we should also be able to rotate it, nope, in edit mode, rotate it like this, then there you go. Actually, it should be by exactly 90 degrees. But on the Y-axis by 90 degrees. And you can see, there we go, it's going along the thing. In fact, the amount that it goes around the circle is dependent on the length of it, which makes sense. So if I make this smaller, it's going to go along more of it. And maybe we should do it so it goes like that. Or alternatively, you can take the height of our thing, because again, we have this procedural coil maker essentially, and increase the height. And you can also increase the coils and do some other weird stuff. Either way, I've kind of remapped this to be the perfect thing. And at this point, let's kind of pick numbers that we like. In fact, I'm seeing quite a bit of distortion, and usually a good way to fix that is you want a bigger curve. And because our curve's too big, we need to increase our height, and let's also increase our coils. The bigger the curve, the less subject it is to distortion, because the difference from point to point on the curve is less. Don't worry about it. Either way, this curve, I'm going to make it a bit smoother. And there we go. Okay, so we got a coil. But because we first did our stretching and squashing and then we're remapping it, you're going to see that very conveniently for us, it kind of does exactly what you would expect. And it turns out if you tried to do this yourself, it wouldn't end up doing it this way. So that's why you got to plan ahead. Now at this point, I do want to try easing. Yeah, easing does look nice. It has that extra stuff going on there. So at this point, you could animate this. And what does animation look like? Just so you know. I'm not going to do it in detail, but we're going to add a keyframe on the first frame. Keyframe these colors. Go a couple frames down. And we want to... Actually, I guess on the first frame, we want it to be compressed to something like that. Add some keyframes. Go a couple frames down. Have it go all the way there. So it should first reach the other side before it brings over the other, I think. I don't know if that's accurate. It'd be useful to see our keyframes. There we go. So on this frame, we keyframe both these colors. Beautiful. And then another 20 frames down, we now map this one. I'm not an animator. I just make the systems that let us animate. So let's see what that looks like. Boop. Boop. Beautiful. It's going to look better when you make this a Bezier interpolation and you kind of max it out, but whatever. What I'm interested in now is we have our setup. How do we make it? And by the way, it's completely procedural in the sense of you can make it thicker, thinner, all the other stuff, of course. But what I'm interested in is how do we make it like look realistic? So how do we first of all make it look like a metal Slinky? But second of all, how do we do the rainbow Slinky thing? Two very important things. So let's do that. First of all, let's just set up our render scene basically. So cycles, I'm not going to set up lighting, so I'm just going to do an HDRI. If you don't know what I'm doing, you know, time to up your skills, boy. Whatever, I'm just setting up a scene so our render looks good. Let's give this thing, one, a metallic material, but two, the rainbow material. And actually, let's focus on the rainbow material, because metallic is you just make it metallic. So what we're going to do is after we make this a mesh, so first it's a curve, and that's actually quite important, because we can't really do much with a curve. After curve to mesh, this thing that we can render, oh no, I'm getting a low battery signal. Hopefully that didn't off-sync the recording. Better wrap up soon, that's what it's telling me. That's the issue with recording with the phone. It's not very good. After we do that, set material. So we actually have a mesh to work with. So we have a material. Let's open it up. Shader editor. And because I'm on my laptop, I have to literally type in the frame all command. But that's a useful tip. Usually on a full keyboard, you can hit the period key and it does the thing. You can see now our material is actually affecting the thing. To make it look good, you literally take the metallic, you bring it up, bring down the roughness, boom, metal Slinky. It's not complicated. Again, how do we get the information of where we are along the curve, even though this thing is compressing and stretching and moving? How do we do that? Well, there's actually a nice parameter for that we can actually send over as an attribute into the shader editor. So what I'm going to do is after we do all our remapping, although it doesn't really matter, I'm going to do a capture attribute. So I want to capture some information. And that information is going to be this thing called spline parameter. It used to be called curve parameter, and it might be in 3.0, so just look for that. We care about this factor. What this actually does is it gives us a number between 0 and 1 from the beginning to the end of our curve, no matter how we transform it. Again, no matter how we transform it, which is important. We don't want to make this rainbow texture that moves if our Slinky does, right? It should stick onto it like it's painted on. So take this attribute that's been captured, send it over. So in our modifier stack, we now have this attribute. We could call it, I don't know, rainbow, because that's what it is. Give it a name that you can type in again. Don't make it this thing that you're like, oh, what did I type in? I can't remember. I don't know if anybody's ever had that problem. It's probably impossible. Copy it over, and now in this attribute, you can see, it's a little hard to tell, but it's going black, and then it increases. It gets more and more white as it goes. And more importantly, it should stick with this. So let's see. Yeah, you can tell the black is staying on the bottom. And I guess what we want to do with this, hopefully this laptop fan isn't too loud. I'll figure this out in the future, have a better mic for this. But if we run this through a hue saturation, so just give this a color, it could be red, green, blue, whatever, and we use this mask as a hue, let's see. Yeah, that should give us a rainbow Slinky. And you can see it stretches with it, is what I'm trying to say. Like, the sections of the color stay where they're supposed to be. So basically, I'm taking the color, offsetting the hue as we move. And if you're thinking, wow, this gradient looks a bit weird, you're right. And I'm so sorry about this fan. Set it to standard. That will make it look better. Connect this to the base color, view it, and boom. You got a metal colorful Slinky. Although, I believe these kinds are plastic. So you want to make sure it's not metal, high roughness, and maybe higher or lower saturation, I don't know. But you basically just set up a scene for this. If you want to like program in a second bounce, you have this circle like rotate off of this point. So cursor to selected. We want to move by the 3D cursor. Nope, in edit mode. Select all of these, and then you can set it up for a second bounce. But we're not doing that here. We just made a Slinky, and I'm running low on battery, so I should end the tutorial. But there you go, guys. We made a mainly geometry node Slinky. It was super simple, but in this sense, it's this way it's much more powerful, and we could control a lot more stuff, as you saw with the easing and all this. Either way, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys for watching. Of course, Patreon, as you've been seeing, you can join that. There's a link in the description. There's a lot of benefits beyond just being in the credits. Thank you, 750 people who are. But you get access to blend files like this one, like the hundreds that I've uploaded in the past. And it's literally hundreds. I started Patreon 2 or 3 years ago. So download any of those. Exclusive tutorials. This month I did the Ritz cracker in detail. That was like a 45-minute hardcore geonodes tutorial. That, other stuff too. Early access to tutorials. You could have seen this. Either way, if you want to support this channel and the CG Matter channel and you want those benefits, there's a link in the description. You literally click that button, make a pledge, and that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.